me initially. My name is Simon Davies. Anybody that doesn't know me, I'm the Executive Director of Teen Cancer America. And I have the greatest pleasure of introducing Brian Smith, who I have known for a few years now. But we'll talk about that and how we got to know Brian. But he's somebody who is a great personality, a really dedicated person to the work that we're doing, and somebody who we feel very affectionate, a lot of affection for Brian. And it really is a pleasure to speak to you, Brian. We really appreciate that. So just say hi to everybody and then we'll get started.
Well, the feeling's mutual, Simon. Thank you for your kind words, and hello, everybody. Thank you for being here.
I'm really impressed with the fact that you're sitting there with guitars and a piano around you, music being a big part of your life, I know, but it looks a pretty cool environment, I have to say.
Yeah, it's my dad's studio. He's got some cool little toys in here.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah. Well, obviously that's where you get your genetic interest in music from. So, and ability indeed, which we'll talk about later as well. But I just wanted to say to everybody else, there will be an opportunity, hopefully at the end of the time, we'll have enough time to be able to ask a few questions if anybody has them. So save up what you've got. You know, we're looking forward to any questions that you have of me or Brian or whatever at the end, but no pressure there. So Brian, let's kind of like take you back a bit. I'm really interested to talk to you about, you know, you're in your family now. You've got your family watching, so you have to be careful what you say, of course. But you know, tell us about, you know, you in the early days and your growing up and teen years before you ever had to even think about the word cancer, and you know, what was going down for you in those early years?
So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and we lived there for about 4 years. My older brother was born a few years before me, and we moved out to Los Angeles when I was about 4. For my dad had work out here, and I pretty much have been here for the most part ever since. I was going to high school out here, and I played tennis in high school. And then when I graduated high school, I went to community college for a few years, and then I transferred to Loyola Marymount and finished my last 2 years there. And that's around the time all the cancer stuff started to happen.
So early on, you had a pretty, you know, physical lifestyle as well as your academic lifestyle. You're playing tennis and other sports. I know you're a big soccer fan. We'll come on to that in a minute, but you know, you were obviously pretty active when you were younger, weren't you?
Yeah, very much so. I played basketball and football and soccer. I didn't play a lot of basketball or football after high school. It was mainly tennis. So I kind of gave up on those early on, but still managed to do some of that stuff. And soccer came back around in my life when I was in college, so I got back into that.
Sure. And your kind of aspirations that we talked about before, I know, you know, you had some pretty cool ideas of getting into, was it political science you were studying, or?
Yeah. Yes, I studied political science at Loyola Marymount University.
Yeah. Good stuff. And I know, well, we talked about soccer last time when we spoke briefly, and you actually had aspirations to head off to the UK. We could have met a different way then, you know, maybe on the terraces at Anfield when you were watching Liverpool, favorite team. But anyway, so let's just then, you know, at what point did your cancer journey kick in? You know, where did it begin? And how old were you when that first affected you?
Sure. So I was 22. I was in my last semester at Loyola Marymount, and I had this, I had testicular cancer. So I guess to be frank, I had a lump on my testicle, and it got very big, and I kind of have the whole horror story of not doing anything about it or doing something about it until it was almost too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things we use these discussions for, Brian, is just to make sure that, you know, anybody listening into these or seeing them when they're being recorded is to kind of educate people as well, you know. And late diagnosis is sadly very common amongst young people. Some of that is because people don't expect to see, doctors and others don't expect to see cancer there, but also young people themselves play a part. And I guess that's a bit of the story with you, is that you didn't really want to think that anything was wrong, and you kept not talking to anybody about it during that early opportunity to get diagnosed. Is that right? Probably something
Exactly.
you regret now, but there's a big message in there that something doesn't feel right, get it checked out. You know, it's really important.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, tell us what that then led to in terms of treatment and surgery and stuff. You know, what do you have to go through?
So I got diagnosed, and then the following Monday I had surgery to have my testicle removed. That happened, and then we found out that it had metastasized to my lung. And so I started like a rigorous chemo treatment over at UCLA in Santa Clarita. And while I was getting the chemo treatment, I had been staring at the wall ahead of me, and I had like a little kaleidoscope vision. And we found out that it metastasized to my brain as well. And I had stereotactic radiation over at the Disney Cancer Center in Providence, St. Joseph's, at Providence, St. Joseph's.
So just for anybody that doesn't understand the terminology, I mean, metastasized is obviously a very medical term for spread. I mean, simple really is that the cancer spreads to different parts of the body. And you probably hear about it on some of the TV adverts and stuff that they have around breast cancer now. But what that means is the cancer's moved, and it's lodged somewhere else, and it's starting to affect that part of the body as well. So you had stuff that was already in the lung that they'd seen, and then you had this kaleidoscope vision, which affected you. So, I mean, that must have been a really scary time for you then.
Yeah, I'd say so. It was interesting. My experience was, it was just kind of one thing after another. And you're kind of going to survival mode, so you don't really have a whole lot of time to process it. You're just doing the next best thing. So it's really hard to describe what my emotions were then. I honestly don't remember.
No, I bet. And it's, you know, it's a sort of cataclysmic occurrence, isn't it? And then on top of that, you were, you know, initially you hear you got testicular cancer, then you hear it spread to your lungs, then you hear that it's got, you know, it's affecting your vision, so that you're going to have some special treatment of that. Well, there's a real roller coaster there that you have to go through. And I mean, what was that? How disruptive was that in what you were doing at the time? Where were you at?
So I was living in West LA in an apartment with my friend who was going to another university called UCLA. UCLA. And I had moved back home when I was getting treatment. And my mom actually drove me to school every day. I had decided that I wanted to finish my degree while all this was going on. And she would drive me to school every day after treatment. So I don't remember how long the days were of treatment, but they were long. And then we'd schlep over from Santa Clarita to West LA for, I think, 4 days a week, 5 days a week or something.
Wow, that's
and I'd
really
go take my classes, and then we'd come back home.
Huh. I mean, that's really intense, and I mean, great that your mum really helped in that way. And I mean, you could have just packed it in. I mean, you know, why, you had enough on your plate, what was really driving you about completing that education?
I had worked really hard to get where I was, and I was determined, and there was nothing that was going to stop me from completing that degree. I wanted to graduate on time, I guess, in my own mind. But yeah, it was just, I just wanted to finish and be done with it. I didn't want to let something disrupt my timeline.
And you did.
Yeah.
You finished. How was it? I mean, how do you think that do you think it affected your results, or do you think you did as well as you would have done anyway?
It's hard to say. I still managed to do pretty well. I didn't finish. I walked in that spring, but I had to finish my senior honors thesis, so that got pushed back a little forward. So technically I graduated a year later, but I was still able to walk with my class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. And I think, again, just a point of reflection here, for young people, particularly at that time in life, to get a diagnosis like cancer, and you think about the sort of trajectory of people's lives, the importance of that education time, or maybe at your age, they might be early career time. It's a really difficult time to deal with that. And at the same time, I mean, you're kind of, you obviously were forced to, not forced, I'm sure you wanted to go back home, but, that became something that you needed to do. And that's a challenge as well, because, you're in the middle of striving to become independent. And then, you find that that's not on the agenda right now. You need a lot of help to get through. Is that, does that ring true with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that that's something that affects a lot of young people as well. And sometimes when they're, post-treatment, looking back on that is tough, because they feel on, what they've missed out on. And did you have a scenario where your friends were off doing other things during your time of treatment and getting on with their lives? And I know you had some good guys and good mates and girlfriends that were supportive, but did you find that there were people that you kind of lost contact with, or you had to watch them getting on with their lives and you not?
Well, I would say that the majority of my friends early on stood by my side and were there, just fully supportive through the whole thing. I had a lot of really good friends. I think there was probably a part of me with certain people that might have been a little envious of what they were doing or where they were at in their lives. I really didn't get upset with or about my friend's situation until things moved on a little further on. So
yeah, no, I get that.
Mhm.
And in terms of you, sort of you, Brian, the person, and what you were going through at that time, I know you had your own ways of dealing and coping with some of the stuff that you were having to go through. Do you want to share what any of that was, and how you coped with those, with that situation?
Sure. So prior to cancer, I had a substance abuse problem that started to develop when I was in high school. So generally up until that time, that's how I coped with things, was through using drugs and alcohol. And when I would say during treatment at times, I abused drugs in my own way. Like, I gave all my prescriptions to my folks to delve out to me, because I knew that I would abuse them. But in a weird way, like, I would hold on to a certain amount and then I'd still abuse them. So I just I cheated the system that I created. And then when I finished my first when I went into remission for the first time, I turned to alcohol and drugs. That was the first thing I had graduated college and had went into remission at around the same time. So I kind of threw this big party, and I broke down at that party. And I think for the first time I had realized it's like, whoa, I just went through this thing I went through, and this is how I'm dealing with it. I think I finally became cognizant of the fact that I might have a problem.
Right. Yeah, and that's not, I'm not saying it's common for young people to just get into substance abuse, but I think that sense of getting to a point where you suddenly reflect on what you've gone through and what's been happening, there's a moment in time, and sometimes I've seen that in people maybe 2 years after treatment, but it catches up, because at the end of the day it's trauma, and to all intents and purposes, this is a post-traumatic stress reaction, to what you've had to go through. But sure, I've spoken to quite a few oncologists in my time who said, darn those young people for their recreational drugs, they're messing up my chemotherapy regime. And I mean, it does, it's not a good thing. Clearly it can harm you anyway, substance abuse, but it can mess with the protocols and the drugs that you're supposed to be having. And so, it isn't a smart thing, but it's not just as easy as saying don't do it or get over it. I mean, you were clearly at times in some, and it was affecting your mental health, and you were not coping with a lot of what was going on, were you?
No, not at all.
Do you ever
Not at
play
all.
where you felt you could, was it easy? I know you described yourself to me as shy at one point when we were talking before, and was it hard for you to open up to people that you might get help from?
I've always just, not always, I think like when I got to adolescence, I kind of just developed this very anxious disposition.
Hmm.
And it intensified when I went away to school, because I had become independent and kind of just didn't have a whole lot of people that I knew there. And I had a miserable college experience. Like I wasn't very active or involved in anything. And, before cancer, I had a lot of issues like with mental health and all that sort of thing. And when all this happened, it intensified. And after the fact, it intensified. So it's something that I've just kind of always been dealing with.
And was there much in the health system itself that sort of offered itself to you, or that was anybody kind of checking you out on this stuff and how you were dealing with it and what your mental health was during this time?
So early on, when I was going through treatment for the first time, not really.
Hmm.
I think one nurse was aware that I had a problem,
Hmm.
and I think she had offered to have her husband help me, and I don't know if I was receptive to it.
Yeah.
So I guess there was that kind of that personal understanding versus professional.
I just wanted to sort of make this point that, that mental health is a big issue in people going through cancer anyway. You had some issues of your own that had developed for sure, and you had substance misuse issues, but mental health is a big issue for people anyway. As you can imagine, people getting depressed or anxious or traumatized, and actually, we feel it very strongly, particularly with young people, that they need help, and this needs to be addressed. And so we're looking, when we're trying to develop the programs that we do, to ensure that mental health support is a component of that, and that actually it's something that really you need to be proactive about. Sitting back and waiting for somebody who's shy, depressed, anxious, maybe substance abusing, and waiting for them to come to you is not a solution. You have to work hard to sort of engage people, and I think that's something that we feel quite strongly about. As well as, I don't know, did you meet many people of your own age?
So early on, there was one guy who was, I think he was like 28. He was in the military and he had the same cancer as me. I don't
Right.
remember seeing him too often.
Yeah.
When I came out of remission and went into, I don't even know what you call it, but yeah, when I came out of remission, I was at UCLA Ronald Reagan, and they actually have a place there called the Sims Mann Center for
Yeah.
Integrative Oncology.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of those mental health services. So I was able to see a psychiatrist, a therapist, and they actually had an AYA support group there, which was when I really started running into people my age who were having a similar problem.
Yeah. Again, because that's really the raison d'etre of Teen Cancer America is, we're trying to get adolescents and young adults into a scenario where they can come together, because we think particularly at that age, it's helpful to have somebody who kind of understands the stage of life you're going through and some of the challenges and can connect. And did you find that when you were starting to connect through the support group system?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard for me to remember specifics. I just remember it helping.
Yeah.
And people, certain people were in college, and other people were maybe a little bit past that. But there was definitely people I could relate to, and it made me feel a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So this is just to warn people, we've still got some way to go with this story, because that wasn't the end of what you had to deal with, was it? I mean, you thought that you tackled the metastatic cancer in your lungs, and you graduated, and you'd had the brain surgery by that time, had you?
No, this was before that.
Before that, so talk us through about what that was about then.
So the summer following, when I went into remission, I seemed like it was okay. Like I was kind of getting back to life again in some way, shape, or form. And I think it was around October, I went and saw that film 50/50 with like 3 of my other friends, and I had a grand mal seizure in the movie theater. And
I mean, the irony of that is just amazing. If anybody knows anything about that film 50/50, it's all about a young person getting cancer and their experiences. And it just seems extraordinary that you then have a grand mal seizure, which is a very serious business. I mean, that means that you would have been unconscious and your friends called an ambulance and all that stuff. So take us through that. You had that seizure. What was that like for you?
so the last thing I just I remember was just things just went black. I locked up, and I woke up in the back of an ambulance, and they told me what had happened. And thank God, I think 2 of my friends were licensed EMTs, so they kind of knew how to handle the situation. And yeah, so they jetted me over to some hospital. I don't remember which one, but I had another brain tumor. And yeah, so we discovered that and immediately started to treat it. And we treated it at the same place at the Disney Cancer Center with the stereotactic radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And the cancer ultimately died. However, what had happened is there was dead tissue left over from the radiation in my brain that were causing me to continue to have seizures. And
I mean,
that's where
it's an unbelievable journey. Carry on. Sorry.
it's okay. I come to this place where I think that one option was continue to radiate or something like that for some reason, or I had an opportunity to get brain surgery at UCLA with a world-renowned brain. It was just like, it was a godsend, because she had one opening and I had the issue I had, and I got in there and I had brain surgery. And going into that, I knew they had informed me that I would have some paralysis on the other side of that to some extent. They couldn't really tell me what it was going to look like. And so Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just kind of like want to just re-explain that. So you had the grand mal seizure. It was as a result of the radiation therapy that you'd had already, and they'd found a tumor. You had the tumor. They did work on that. They reduced that to nothing, which was amazing. But as a result of that, they damaged tissue around that, and it was that tissue that then started, meaning that you either had to have more radiation, which could have been more damaging to your brain, or you had to have surgery to remove it, which could affect your movement as a result of that. Not great choices, really, were they?
No.
And you chose the latter. You chose to have the surgery. And clearly, whoever did that did a really good job, because you haven't had a relapse of that problem, but it has left you with challenges, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, totally. I have weakness on my left side as a result of it. I have range of motion, as you can see. It's very difficult for me to move my fingers, and then I can walk, but there's definitely weakness on the lower half of my body too, on the left side. But it's not my dominant side, so I was blessed in that way. Could have. But yeah, there's other things that happened as a result of the brain injury that I have, that I've discovered recently. But that was kind of the first noticeable thing, was the movement stuff, at least for me.
And that was immediate, and you had some therapy to kind of deal with that as best they could, but you were I think it wasn't long after that we first met you, but that must have been really tough, having been through everything that you've been through, to then have that on top of it is, it's rough. And to hear you say, I'm blessed because it was on the right, whichever, it's on your left side and not your right side. Well, yeah, I guess so. But it's amazing that you've managed to deal with that. And so that's affected. I mean, did it affect you cognitively at all? Was you anything like speech or concentration or anything like that affected?
Cognitively, I seem to be okay. It really messed with my memory, like really bad. I found out recently that I'm in like the lowest percentile of people my age with memory. So I struggle with that. And there's things I've learned that have helped me deal with that. Is
that short-term memory or long-term, or both?
I don't know for certain. I think both.
I was just thinking, your recollection of your story is great. I mean, obviously there's blank spaces, but I think there would be those for anybody. But
it's short term. I was just someone messaged me here. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay, so that's challenging. That's challenging. And where did that leave you in terms of any further education or employment, or what happened next? After you come out of that surgery, presumably you had some rehabilitation. Where did that take you after that?
So there was a period of, I think, I don't know if it was 6 weeks or 6 months. The number 6 sticks out in my head, but I had done like really intensive physical therapy, and I had gotten a lot back, and things seemed pretty hopeful at the time. And then I was sitting in a chair, and I always say this is all I really remember, is I was sitting in a chair and just felt something go across my body. And what had happened was that I was like left in the weakened state that I was in when I first came out of surgery. it was either that or I had become so conscious of what had happened to me that it just hit me. I don't remember if it was one or the other, but it is one or the other. I don't know. That just had happened. And what that did is it just like, it made me throw in the towel.
Right.
Like I just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been a really low moment for you.
Mhm.
I think you described it to me as the kind of perfect storm, everything collapsing in on you. You caved in. You must have felt terrible. And I'm guessing that took you to some pretty dark places.
Yeah, no,
So,
totally. Yeah, that is when, yeah, things were definitely awful then. They had pulled me down off of my steroids too quickly. So I had to go back into treatment. I was on this treatment called Avastin,
mhm.
and they pulled me down off the steroids slowly. And then when I had stopped that treatment, I was still on medications, and I was getting off as many of those medications as I could. And at some point, I decided to get a medical marijuana prescription for CBD. I think I told myself that I was getting it to help with something, but the reality is I got it just to just deal with things,
Hmm.
and wound up abusing that, and
Wow.
that just all kind of spiraled downward into street drugs and all of that. And so there was a awful run with all that stuff.
So you were, I mean, emotionally, you were broken at that time, and you obviously were having a really hard time and hitting bottom, and drugs, and as well as still having to deal with the physicality of how you'd been affected. And I think it was around that time that we first met you, where we I can't remember how we heard about you. I think it was your dad actually, and we said we just happened to be doing some photo shoot, and we said come along to a photo shoot. I'm sure you hated that photo shoot because suddenly you're thrust into with a whole load of people, and they were all taking photographs, and that was probably pretty tough moment, I should think, actually. But we didn't know you well enough to know any different, and but it did mean that we made a connection with you. But how did you start to get out of that that place? What changed? What started to make it better?
So it was when I got sober. So things got to a point where people had kind of had enough, and I think I had had enough too, of just the behavior that was going on. And I went to a rehab for 30 days, and just really did anything and everything I can to get sober. And I ran into you guys at some point along the way again. I was looking for a job. It's like really the first time that I'd had to deal with a lot of different things, but also just regaining my independence. And so at some point I started seeking out employment again, and I saw you go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
no, I was going to say the rehab worked. I mean, that you clip all right, you and the rehab worked, because you don't do that stuff and just get through it, because other people. You must have really made an effort to get out of that, and a lot of people, can't deal with that. But you did. You pulled through it in 30 days to a point where you could even start to think about employment and getting your life back together.
Yeah, so it was rehab coupled with 12-step programming. So
Yeah.
that's been a big part, continues to be a big part of it, and really kind of what set me on my way for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's extraordinary and it feels to me, I'm not saying you probably have had your moments still then, but it kind of feels like that was the big turning point, that you've really moved on incredibly since then, haven't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely when things started to go a little bit better.
And then you applied for a job with us, which you thought you were going to get.
Yeah, I mean, like I thought the second phone call was an interview, and that's not what it was. And it's okay because it actually turned out to be an amazing thing. You guys, I think it was you, Hillary, and Michelle.
Yeah,
You guys kind of you turned the tables on me and asked what you could do to help me, you know? And you guys threw out all these cool things. And yeah, so I think there was two things that I actually went ahead and pursued, and one was the AY support group at the cancer community.
yeah,
I think, yeah, and the play it back music program.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just for the benefit of everybody else, we saw Brian's application, and he didn't actually have the skills we were looking for, and that's aside from anything that you were going through, your cancer status or some of the physical challenges you had. That was nothing to do with. Well, it was just simply that there were other candidates that were in a better place than you to be considered for that. But we knew, because we'd met you before, and you'd sort of disappeared off the face of the earth as far as we were concerned. You never made contact with us again. You're coming back, and we thought, well, let's bring him in and let's talk to him. And I remember, talking to both Michelle and Hillary about it and saying, I'm sure, there's some ways that we can connect with Brian, and at the very least, let's have that and let's see what we can do. So that was great, and I think the cancer support community is a good place. They do good stuff, and I hope that was helpful. But it was clearly finding out that you had a real passion for music that brought us into discussion with you about joining our Play It Back education program. Do you want to, what talk us through that? That introduction, because I guess it's still probably quite challenging for you to kind of start new things. I mean, what was that like for you?
I really was I gave Kenley a call. Kenley's the producer at the playback music program, and just kind of dove into it. I connected with him over the phone. Then I went there in person, and we just started to hang out and make music and have a whole lot of fun, which is something I hadn't had in a really long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, I think we talked about music probably being in your genes, and that clearly was the case. Kenley is for anybody else that doesn't know, Kenley's an amazingly experienced, amazing guy, just very, very talented producer, can just play just about any instrument and sings as well, and is a songwriter, in fact, but also has spent a lot of time working with young people with cancer, and is just, I think I can say he's incredibly intuitive, isn't he, about finding the place at which to connect with people. And that's clearly the ground that you two covered, was him being able to connect with you where you are at, where you're at that time. And I remember that I can remember that the first piece of work that you did with Kenley was a rap, and it was pretty heavy. It was. Do you remember that one?
of course,
I can't remember the name of it now,
it's
but
called So Alone.
So Alone, and it is a beautiful rap, and it's really, but it was amazing. I mean, it would, for me, it sounded like this was you kind of telling your story in a way which was incredibly powerful, and was it cathartic, to be able to do that? Did that help you?
For sure, 100%.
And there were two songs, and we'll get to the second song in a minute, but we then took you as soon as we realized that you were up for it, and you know, your personality was shining through and you were really expressing yourself, which was great. Kenley was loving working with you. Just so happened we had a conference, and we took you along and made you made you perform your song to 300 people at this conference. And which again, I think, God, when I think where you come from, you know, we come to be able to do that amazingly, which was a blast. And of course, I mean, you completely brought the house down. I mean, you know, I don't think anybody was bothered about listening to any oncologists after that. They were just really enjoying your music. So, but yeah, I mean, that was quite an experience, wasn't it?
Absolutely, that was so cool. We had a great time.
And you know, before we get on to sort of how you've helped the scheme and things like that, let's just talk about what you've done in it, because you've been the subject of a podcast. So the Pantheon podcast company that's run a podcast all about Play It Back have done that, and you was a very successful podcast, and you know, great piece of storytelling, and that's out in the public now, and a lot of people have listened to our podcast, so that's very exciting. That's a part of it. And then we've just recently, you've recorded your music and digitally it's all there, but just recently we've been making a vinyl of all of the Play It Back artists' music. And so I'm gonna take this moment. We've got a couple of minutes, but because we had to go out and buy a record player, so we got a $50 record player for the charity. I'm going to show it to you here, everybody. See it? And it'll sound terrible, so just be prepared for that, because we haven't got good speakers and we're on Zoom. But here is Brian's second song. Sunrise, is it called?
Yeah, Sunrise.
I'm not going to play it all, Brian, so just be prepared, but you're on vinyl, Brian.
So rad.
We dance, no fear. They stare, don't care. Girl, we're moving like the blue.
Here's the rap.
Getting down like the blues. Curl around like a spoon. You know how we do. I wanna see the rise of the sunrise. Hearts beat together.
So there you go. You're on
So
vinyl,
cool.
man. So just
So
in case any of you out there are thinking that there's a commercial record, there isn't, because we would have had to set up a record company. But we have got vinyls made. You will have your own vinyl and vinyls to give your family as well. And that's just the test. So we have to have the pressing, won't be done for a while yet, but we have to agree that the test is good enough for in the next couple of days. And Kenley and I and Evan, who did the production, have been listening to it. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to have a vinyl. I'm very impressed. Have you got a record player at home? You'll have to go out and buy one.
I'll probably have to go out and buy one.
I'll do a bit of advertising here. Victrola, $50. You can't go wrong with that. It has got a hole in the back where you can put some speakers in, so you might be able to get a better sound out of it. But it's great. Great for picnics. Anyway, look, it's really good, and you know, so just love the fact that you've had this journey so far, and that music has really helped you. And it means a lot to us because it's our program. Now, you've actually taken on some responsibility within the program as well. So, tell us a bit about that. What are you doing to help it?
Sure. So I've took on the role of assisting Kenley and just kind of helping out with the web page when we first started building it, and even having the opportunity to create songs with other AYAs, which has been incredible, and that's actually how I met my lovely fiance, is a member of the playback music program as well.
Bit of a shout out now. Just say hi.
Hey, Alexa.
Hey there.
So you two have met, and that's all going well.
Yeah, it's great.
We're
It's
looking
great.
forward to the first play it back wedding. So
Yeah.
so that's brilliant. So and actually, we're getting you on the payroll now, aren't we? So we're going to give you some money for what you're doing for us. I mean, we really appreciate that you volunteered, but it was time to formalize that because you've done such a great job for us. And on top of that, you're also doing some work for Lily, who's on the call here. Hi, Lily, who is in charge of our social media marketing, etc. And you're helping her with stuff as well.
Yeah, helping her with stuff and doing all sorts of other stuff. I get to work with all of you great people. It's just been amazing. I absolutely love it.
Well, we love you, Brian, and we've everybody really appreciates you and really enjoys working with you. And I don't mean that in a patronizing sense. I mean, I think people really value what you bring to the organization. We're not seeing you as a charity case. We're seeing you as somebody that's actually adding value to what we do, and you've done that in the Play It Back program, and you've done that in helping Lily with the social media and the marketing. So it feels like this is really an upward trajectory for you. And of course, how great that you've got a relationship now, and that's working. Where do you put yourself now, and how would you describe yourself now in the place you're at in your life?
This is the best place I've ever been in, I think, at the very least, since all this stuff has happened to me. But I can't ever really remember being this happy before, I really haven't. It's just crazy, like you never really realize like how alone you are until you're not. And I keep saying that a lot lately, because it's like the more love I'm surrounded by, the more people I have around me. It's just like I really truly was so alone. Like I really was. And it's an awful place to be. Yeah. And I know other people out there are going through it too. And for crying out loud, I really do feel your pain. It's an awful place to be, and there's other people out there like you, there really is. And we care, and we have stuff out there for you to heal. There's stuff out there that exists.
And Brian, do you think there's positives that you can draw from those awful experiences that you had? Obviously there's regret about what happened. I understand that, but do you think that there's learning in there, or something out of that has helped you in any way?
Absolutely. It humbled me for sure. It gave me perspective. It also gave me purpose. I know why I'm here still, and what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, that's great. Well, and we sure are all benefiting from it, and we appreciate you for that. Look, we've got we've got a few minutes until the end. I just want to see if there's anybody out there. Laura, if you can get people, make it available for people to speak. If there's anybody that wants to ask Brian a question or ask me a question or make a comment. What's this? Rick Davis, when was the last time you spun vinyl, Brian? And Alex says that song gets stuck in his head all day every time he hears it. That's good. That's a good song when it gets stuck in your head. Yeah. Have you, was it a while since you spun some vinyl?
Oh, geez. I mean, I think one of my friends had a record player and we messed around with it one day. But like the last one that I remember before that, I did some DJing in junior high, but like my family had this Fisher Price vinyl and like we used to just get that thing going and we'd all just dance, you know, and that was over 20 years ago, well over 20 years ago.
Well, I tell you, it's exploding right now, you know, and I've been reading a lot about vinyl. We're very lucky. We, you know, shout out to all the people that are involved in making this vinyl and for Larry McNenny and his wife who funded it. But it's amazing, and but the whole vinyl thing is getting really big now. And it's a cool thing. It's a cool thing to have. So that's pretty good. So questions, anybody got any questions or comments that they want to make? Feel free, put your hand out or just shout out. I think there's enough of us just to, or few enough of us just to shout out.
Do you want me to say something? Can you hear me?
Go for it, Michelle. Yeah.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Michelle.
So, well, no, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story because it's so amazing and inspirational. And yeah, I loved in the beginning you just wanting to work with us, and then we found this great way to work together, like you said. So, you know, I think that's amazing and where you've gone with it. So I just want to say thank you to you. And so with all this music, who are your like musical influences? Where do you get sort of some of your inspiration for your songs?
I appreciate that, Michelle. I appreciate you. It's a lot of different things, you know. I really am tuned into rap music, and I mean it goes way further back and way deeper than that. So I love Kanye West, I love Drake, I love all those, The Weeknd, all the modern stuff. But I mean, I grew up listening to the Beatles. I love Johnny Cash, you know. I love some like modern folk music. I like Bob Dylan. Sheesh, I love so much stuff. I love pop punk from like the early 2000s. My fiance loves that stuff too. We totally connect on that. I'm really just, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you're obviously not prejudiced about what you listen to. A very wide.
No, not at all. It's all good. It's all good, you know. Art's beautiful, it's subjective, so it's whatever you're gonna get from it. If it hits you, cool.
Huh. You're a bit of a philosopher, aren't you, Brian? I can tell it's coming through. You'll have to write a book sometime. Thoughts of Brian. Anybody else got anything?
I have a question.
Hey,
Lily.
Lily, go for it.
Hi, Brian. So coming from such a dark place and struggling with so many mature issues, I just wonder, what was it that made you get over the hump of like coming to a social gathering with an organization that you didn't know about before?
Well, I think the first time that I met with TCA was definitely my dad. There was probably some small part of me that wanted to go, but my dad was trying to get me to go to that, and that was, I don't know, I made it there, and it was very difficult to socialize in that moment. But I would say, like, after everything and when I had kind of sobered up and just kind of started to walk through some fears, right? Like, you know, it's you know, how do we walk through any fear? I was like scared, right? It's just, you just got to do it. That doesn't mean it's easy. Heck no. I'm not like a big, I'm good in this setting, one-on-one. I love talking to people like that. You put me in a room full of people, though, I'm usually scared out of my mind. And I'll find some level of comfort. Maybe I'm getting better at that. I don't know. I'll give myself a little credit, but yeah, you gotta put yourself out there, and it's gotta make sense for you when you do it.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And then I have a follow-up. That's really good. Thank you for sharing. My follow-up is, what, after you joined, after you participated, and after you met some other young people like you through Teen Cancer America, and you kind of kept associating with us, what encouraged you to keep coming back, or what were like your thoughts, good and bad, about letting people be involved in your life?
I think there was so many positive emotions that were coming from the program. I was just like really experiencing joy again, creating music and that sort of thing. And when other people started to get involved, and I was able to participate in their creating music and just really see how they benefited from it, it was kind of like, it was just really easy to keep doing that. And it still is, because
Yeah.
I mean, it started out with 3 of us, like early on. 3 turned to 5, 5 turned to 10. And for crying out loud, we have like 37 people now who have gone through the program. And it's just so evident that this is helping people. And I'm very much one of those people. And yeah, it's just very simple to come back, you know.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You know, listening to what you say, Brian, what I think is really important in what you've said, and what is for many people, is that, you know, you come through this time where essentially you're kind of in victim mode, and also it's always everybody else that's helping you or trying to help you. And I think to find yourself in a position of responsibility for helping other people is a turning point in itself as well. And we know from the feedback from others that have been on the program how helpful it is for them to have you there by their side, and for you to engage with them. And I think that's a really, you know, it's a way of kind of rebalancing things, because obviously when you go through treatment, you're down and it's everybody else is around you, but to be able to give back, because yeah, it's challenging. You can feel guilty about how other people have, you know, helped you, and then you get a chance to give back, and you do it really well.
Thank you.
You just got to say yes. Anyway, listen, we come to the end of our time. You know, this I want to thank you, Brian. I think it's a strong person who can stand up and talk about that stuff in front of people. And you don't know the people that are going to watch this over time. You know, there could be many people. So you know, you've given yourself some exposure there. But I think what you've done is you really helped other people. You've helped other people in what you're doing, and this will help other people more, because people will make connections with some part of your story, and they'll be helped by it, and you know, it's incredible what you've done. And you know, we're full of admiration for you, Brian. We're a big fan, and I know that goes for the whole TCA team and people that get to know you, and Kenley and all the other people. You know, we appreciate you, and we're grateful to have you in our lives, and you know, you made a big difference. So it's been a privilege to be a part of that journey and to help you in any way, but it's also a privilege to, you know, to have you helping us, and you know, helping the other young people that we're working with. So on that note, I want to thank you, and we'll end this conversation. I'll see you again soon. But next time you'll be, hopefully it won't be too long before you get that vinyl in your hands.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Simon.
Good, good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you all. We appreciate you. Carry on staying friends with Teen Cancer America. Support us any way you can. Brian's music program is something that we fund and we always need help with. And it doesn't have to always be money. It may be some contribution in some other way that you can make. So, but, you know, it's all good. So thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you. And I'll see you all in the next conversation, if not before.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It means a lot. Thank you again, Simon.
That's all right. Laura, you can cut us off now.